Hello again, lovely people. I just finished a video talking about one of my favorite books, Little Women. And I was sitting here thinking to myself, you know what? I can't get Wuthering Heights out of my brain. So why don't we turn the camera on and maybe we'll try and work through this. Sorry if this is kind of a little off script from my normal talking about classics, but I think Wuthering Heights itself is a little off script for a classic. I've never read another book like it. And I'm a little doing this about it, just unsure about Wuthering Heights, and I don't know why. I think I know why. So let's try and work through this craziness of myself. So I initially read Wuthering Heights, and I was like, oh, okay, Jane Eyre, Charlotte Brontë wrote Jane Eyre, it was really good, so let's give another Brontë sister a try. It's probably great. So I start reading Wuthering Heights, and the way it's told from the beginning is very, very different from probably most books that I have read. It's a third person's account. So you start off with, I believe his name is Mr. Linton. There's a lot of names in this book too that are similar to each other and different. So I may end up referencing my phone quite a bit in here. So if this ends up being really choppy, again, I apologize. But it's because I have to make sure I'm talking about the right thing. So it starts off, Mr. Linton, he's going to rent a room, not at Wuthering Heights itself, but at another part of the estate that is owned by Mr. Heathcliff, the older Mr. Heathcliff at this point. And he goes to Wuthering Heights to inquire about something, I'm not sure, but he meets Heathcliff for the first time. So Mr. Linton meets Heathcliff, just this awful argument kind of ensues at the beginning. He meets Joseph, Joseph, I just despise the character of Joseph, but whatever. He is kind of this backwater hick sort of guy who cannot speak proper English for the life of me. Going through Joseph's English was like pulling teeth, and it's torturous, and I hated reading it every time Joseph opened his mouth. And I think you're meant to kind of hate Joseph, but anyway, he's like a farmhand. Older farmhand, and you meet Joseph for the first time, you meet Hareton for the first time, you also meet Kathy the Younger, I'll call her Kathy the Younger, and you kind of get the idea of how these people are living together, and it's not in a copacetic way. It is frustration, it is anger, it is deep hatred for one another. It's just all negative vibes all up in this house all the time. And so Mr. Linton stays in what was Catherine, which is Kathy the Older, in her bedroom at Wuthering Heights a long time ago. And then sees her ghost, maybe, kinda, a little bit, I don't know, has a nightmare. He also reads, and before he sees the ghost, he reads Catherine's, I think they're her diaries or her journals or something like that. So she gets kind of a small account of, I think it was the life that Catherine and Heathcliff had when Heathcliff came to the family, and then her brother Hindley. So Hareton and Hindley, I keep getting messed up in my own head. But anyway, so, you meet all of them. And Hindley Earnshaw is just absolutely cruel and awful to Heathcliff from the beginning. He feels like Heathcliff needs to be a servant and shouldn't be treated well. Kathy and Hindley's father treat Heathcliff very well. We don't really know the reason why. Heathcliff is just brought in as an orphan. So there's that backdrop. And then Linton goes back to the Grange after he spends the night there, and he thinks he sees Cathy's ghost and all of this. Yeah, he tells Heathcliff that he's seen a ghost. He's seen a young woman's ghost. And so then you hear Heathcliff wanting to kind of stay in the room, and you hear him from Linton's point of view that he opens the window and he's poking his head outside the window. He says, "Cathy, come back to me. Cathy, I know you're out there. Come to me. Whatever. There's a ghost. Maybe. I don't know. It's weird. The whole book is kind of weird." So then Linton goes back to the Grange. At the Grange, he meets Nellie Dean. Nellie Dean then, at this point, takes up telling the story to Linton. So then you have another person's, third person account of the things that happen. I'm so sorry I had to cut. I had to go put my child to bed. And I realized I watched what I've recorded, and I realized I messed up so bad. So every time I said Linton, for the first, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes of this video, I actually meant Mr. Lockwood. So not Linton for the first 5 minutes of this, Mr. Lockwood. I messed up. I knew I was going to mess up. So again, forgive me for how crazy this one is and off script it is. So now we're at the part where Nellie Dean is now telling the story to Mr. Lockwood. Mr. Lockwood is very interested in Heathcliff as a character and wants to know his background and his story. So Nellie Dean kind of starts from the very beginning. She does mention at the beginning that she grew up in the Earnshaw house. So she has grown up around Heathcliff, Catherine, and Hindley. So those three at the beginning. And Mr. Edgar Earnshaw, she also explains to him, to Lockwood, that Mr. Edgar Earnshaw had brought Heathcliff home. He was a foundling in Liverpool, and he brought him home and treated him very well, treated him like a son, loved him very much. So it is suspected then that Heathcliff is probably the son of Edgar Earnshaw, and who knows who else, because that sort of thing wasn't uncommon, but it is not explicitly said. In fact, there's a lot of things in this story that are not explicitly said that you kind of have to infer yourself, or, maybe you don't infer it. Maybe it just remains a mystery. There's a lot of kind of loose ends in this book, but they're not loose ends that are important. The important bits are always tied up. The loose ends, if they exist, usually are not the most important thing to the story. So anyway, so Nellie Dean tells her side of the story, and Nellie Dean is an unreliable narrator. She's also very biased. So you have to take all of that into account when you are listening or reading Nellie Dean's account of everything that happened. So she tells the story of how Heathcliff, Cathy, and Hindley grow up together and what that's like. Cathy is a wild, boisterous child. She's spoiled. She always gets her way. And she wants to continue to be like that forever and never, I think. She's also very selfish and self-centered. Heathcliff adores Cathy, I think, at this point in the book. He's actually a very loving, very kind child. He wasn't bad. He was not bad at the beginning. He wanted to do everything in the world for Cathy, and Cathy just kind of treated him like a plaything. Somebody that would do whatever she wanted and would support her in whatever way she wanted. So that was kind of their little arrangement. They were always together. They always wanted to be together. Whenever they got in trouble, they got in trouble together. They were two peas in a pod. And I think that Heathcliff wanted that to always be that way, because he loved Cathy. He was in love with Cathy, and I think it got to a point for him where it was like this passionate love. Hindley, on the other hand, did not like Heathcliff whatsoever. He wanted Heathcliff gone and wanted to basically destroy him, so he would do all kinds of awful things to Heathcliff. Then Hindley leaves, and he's gone for some time. I think he goes to school, perhaps. I don't remember exactly. Mr. Earnshaw dies, and so does his wife. So both Catherine's and Hindley's parents end up passing away. Hindley inherits the estate of Wuthering Heights. Hindley, when he comes back, he brings a wife with him, and her name, I think, was Frances. Yeah, and she's kind of, she's not really much of a character in the book, to be honest. She doesn't have much going on. She's pretty much only there just to produce, another child, and so that does end up happening. So she's the mother of Hareton. Hindley returns. He basically turns Heathcliff into a servant and has him as a farmhand from maybe like the ages of like early teenager into his adulthood. And then Heathcliff decides one day that he cannot stand to be a servant anymore around Cathy, and Cathy starts to treat him like a servant as well, and thinks that she's above him in station and all of that, and kind of makes fun of him, and she's just horrible and starts being really terrible to Heathcliff. But Heathcliff still absolutely loves and adores Cathy and just cannot stand it, and she wants to just kind of have him around to boss around for the rest of her life at this point, and he can't stand it anymore. So he leaves. Heathcliff up and leaves, and then he comes back, I don't know, it's like 10 years later or something like that. And Hindley is basically just drinking himself to death, gambling all the time. He has lost his wife. And Cathy decides to marry Edgar Linton, who lives at the Grange. And the Lintons and their family have been living at the Grange for as long as the Earnshaws have been living at Wuthering Heights. And so Cathy decides to go ahead and marry Edgar Linton because it would be a prosperous marriage for her, and she didn't hate Edgar Linton, I guess, and so they get married. When Heathcliff returns, he discovers that Cathy has married Edgar Linton, and he instantly just despises and hates Edgar Linton, and he decides, I'm wondering if he decides at that point, or if it was just before then, and when he left, that he was going to do everything in his power to make every single one of the other characters in this book absolutely miserable, and to destroy not only the Earnshaws, but now also the Lintons, because the Lintons have slighted him by Cathy marrying into the Linton family. So Heathcliff goes about this in just the most diabolical ways possible. He, is abusive physically, mentally, in every way possible to practically every character in this story, except for Cathy, the elder herself. He still loves Cathy. He wants to be with Cathy, even though now, because Cathy is with Linton, Edgar Linton, it's impossible for him to be with her. Cathy and Heathcliff have such a passionate discourse romance, longing for each other, that I think she makes herself sick by concentrating so much on that. The story, being told through Nellie Dees, you don't know all of what has happened between Heathcliff and with Catherine. You just don't know the full story at all. You don't know if they have ever been together romantically, if they, you know, perhaps the child that ended up being Kathy the Younger, perhaps that is Heathcliff's child. We don't know that for sure because she's not married to Heathcliff. So you are to assume that this is the child of Edgar and Kathy. You don't really know for sure though. So there's a lot of holes. There's a lot of things that weren't talked about. And I think that's one of the frustrations I have with the book, actually, is that because it is told from the perspective of characters outside of, you know, the main relationship of Heathcliff and Kathy, that it's not told from Heathcliff or Kathy's perspective. That's what I struggle with, because you don't know everything. And I want to know everything. I'd want to know everything that had gone on in that relationship, because you could really fit all the pieces in place, I think, then. And it wouldn't be such a loose story. It'd be tighter to me. You would know everything that's going on. So there is that. I think that's one part I'm not too keen on, but I think a lot of people aren't keen on that. It's because it is told from this other perspective. You are the other looking in on this and judging, almost. And who are we to judge, you know, this relationship? You do judge. You definitely do judge because of the awful things that are described that Heathcliff does to things. And the other characters, how Kathy even treats people. Kathy and Heathcliff are the worst characters in the entire book. But yet they're also the most interesting characters in the entire book, which is a shame. Nellie Dean, I think, has a really big soft spot for Heathcliff. But when she tells the story, she is not pulling any punches about the behavior of Heathcliff. And maybe she does despise him in some ways. She maybe has this uncomfortable way of talking about him. She's not comfortable with him. Maybe that's it. I don't know. But she does seem to shine some light on his good qualities as the story is being told. So, despite all of Heathcliff's bad qualities, Nellie Dean does talk about his good qualities as well. At least I think she does. She does describe him as being rather dark, but everyone in this book describes Heathcliff as a dark, like physically, you know, darker. He has dark hair, his complexion's darker than everyone else. But as far as I know, he's still, you know, of the Caucasian descent, not, you know, not of another race. The amount, I think that what distracted me the most from the core of the story and the kind of more interesting aspects of the story was just the violence, the child abuse, the neglect, because those descriptions are there. They're in your face. They're not going anywhere. They're, you know, you have to kind of get past that stuff yourself in order to understand the more complicated parts of the story. I feel like I don't understand the more complicated parts of the story as well as I could, because that, you know, that violence is just in your face throughout this book. I think that was the other main issue I had with this, is just the violence is in your face, and I had a really hard time just looking past that and looking into the story. I think rereading the text in the future, not right this second, maybe in 6 months or a year, I'm going to pick up Wuthering Heights again and read it again, because it gets in here. It really does. It sticks in your brain, and it makes you think about some things. Not necessarily the violence part of it, but just the weird things that kind of happen to us in the story. It goes to an extreme that I think a lot of books would not go to. When your passion, okay, this is just the example, but like when your passion for someone drives you to the extent of when their husband is buried, that you request of the not the undertaker, but the person who buries the dead. Maybe it is the undertaker, I don't know. The grave digger. When you ask the grave digger to dig up the actual coffin, when you ask the grave digger to dig up the coffin of the person that you loved and open it so that you can see their face, that's a little messed up. I mean, they're dead. They've been decomposing in there for how many years? I don't know how many years had gone by. And then Heathcliff reportedly, this is, I think, from Nellie Dean's perspective as well, reportedly imagines that, you know, Kathy is as perfect as she was the day she died. Not a thing has happened to her face. She has not decomposed. When it goes to that extreme, it kind of sticks in your brain, doesn't it? Am I nuts? And then, as you know, the passion that Heathcliff has when he has won, when he has everything at the end, and he has basically decimated the future of both the Earnshaws and the Lintons forever and ever, and all he has to do is, you know, continue to live and to outlive the children, Hareton and Kathy the Younger. That's all he has to do. And he has won. He gives it up at that point. And it seems like that he has given that up because he no longer has to prove anything to anybody at that point. And maybe it's also because now the ghost of Kathy has decided that that's enough. And your revenge is complete. And I don't want you going to heaven. Because, what's the part that kind of convinces me of that? It was the discussion that Heathcliff and Nellie Dean have near the end. And Nellie Dean tells, because he's ill. He's just being ill. And mysteriously ill, in fact. And I think he talks to Nellie Dean about having seen the ghost of Kathy, if I'm remembering this correctly. And Nellie Dean, and talking to Nellie Dean about death, and Nellie Dean says, well, before you die, you need to save your soul, you know, through Christianity and God and all of that. Through the church, because the church, you know, won't bury you in the cemetery, you know, if you're not part of the church. And it seems like that Heathcliff doesn't want, well, one, he doesn't want to be buried in the church, and it's either he would rather be haunting the moors, or Kathy wants him to be haunting the moors. I don't recall exactly. This is why I need to reread it again. But there is, at the end of it, heavily implied that Kathy and Heathcliff are haunting the moors at the end. So maybe Kathy was so selfish that she wanted Heathcliff to haunt the moors with her. And that is how they're together in the end. Who knows? I don't know. So anyway, that's kind of the craziness I've been dealing with. That's my thoughts that have been going around it. I feel like especially as I was reading it, I was like, I don't get this. This is so weird. This is such a weird book. This is such a violent book. Oh my gosh, I cannot handle the child abuse. You know, it just soul crushing, absolutely soul crushing. But after I don't know, it's been maybe 2 or 3 weeks. 2 weeks. It's been 2 weeks for sure since I finished reading it. It's just stuck with me, and I've looked up different parts of it, trying to understand what I had read. Thought to myself, well, maybe I need to reread it again now. But I don't want to reread it again so close. I think I'm going to give myself a couple more months, and then maybe I'll reread it again. So this is one of two signs to me. This is either I really hate this book, and I don't understand it, and I'm trying to suss out my hating for this book and trying to understand why I really hate this book by maybe understanding it better and trying to figure it out. Or maybe I really like it, and it's a puzzle, and I like puzzles. Puzzles are great. I love a good puzzle. I love D&D. I love a good puzzle. And I think that it's brilliant, and I think that it's just intricate and interesting and makes you want to go back to it and discover more that you don't maybe understand or first or second blush. Maybe you need to keep reading it before you really understand it. And I don't know where I am. I'm lost, and I don't know where I am. It just confused me. I don't think anything has touched me and confused me so much and unsettled me. I think that that's it. I've never been so unsettled by a book like I have been Wuthering Heights. And I don't think it should bother me this much. I think I am going to reread it. I'm going to give myself a bit more time though. And if, I don't know, maybe by the end of January, into February, if I'm still feeling like I need to pick this up again and reread it because I just don't get it, or if I just feel like I need to reread it, then I will. I'll just reread it then. But otherwise, I'm going to give myself 6 months or a year and then reread it again. So, anyway, let me know how you guys feel about Wuthering Heights. How did you feel about it the first time you read it? This is just my raw reaction to it. Really. I didn't know what to do with it. My brain was so, messed up. This book does not follow the standard Victorian conventions. I know that there are many Victorian novels that are gothic, but this is gothic, to an extreme. And there's no love story. I mean, there is a love story, but this is not a love story. This is a story of anguish and pain and fear and betrayal and loathing and all of these vile, negative, venomous emotions that a person can feel, all wrapped up into one book. And Emily Brontë is either a genius or she lived through some stuff, and I feel for her. So, anyway, thank you all so much. I think I am just going to leave it there. What better way to end it, honestly. I think I am just going to leave it there. So, thank you so much again for joining me. I am on Goodreads. That stuff is in the description below. I have also my list of classics down below as well. All that's in the description. So if you are interested in this, bookish content, that sort of thing, please subscribe. I've had 20 subscribers. I can't believe I have 20 subscribers. Oh my gosh. I never thought I'd have any subscribers at all, and thank you guys so much for subscribing. But anyway, I think that's it. I hope that you all have a great day, and let me know what you think about Wuthering Heights. It's just, I don't know, I think I might love it. I think I might love it after talking. I don't know. Anyway, have a great day. Bye.